Hello everybody, I am the Professor Z, and after a brief hiatus, I have returned, leaving my lab to bring you my review of Chapter 41 of Made in Abyss, titled, The Balancing of Values. So, it's been a while, so where did we leave off? Alright, Manya is dead. Not really though. As you all know, the creatures of the Abyss are very unique biologically, and Manya is no different. Instead of being crushed by the Narahede, Manya is more like one of those rubber toys where you squeeze it and its eyes pop out. To compensate for the sudden lack of air, Manya's body popped its eyes out and pushed its innards out its butt. All that needed to be done is for our group to push those things back in, and Manya would be fine. But that wouldn't be the end of this issue. Because if you look back at the previous chapter, Maji stated that stealing value was the greatest sin. So what happens when you damage it? This is where we are introduced to the balancing, a system within the village that values all things, and in turn balances these values as well. For example, when someone breaks an item of value, that person must compensate the owner of the broken item with something of equal value. In this case though, a few bucks and a firm handshake won't be enough, because if there's one thing that holds greater value for Riko than anything else, it's her friends. This kind of love for something is an insurmountably high value, and thus triggers the balancing. The balancing takes the shape of these inky black creatures. With their tendrils, they begin to tear apart the Narahede that hurt Manya, searching for a value to match that which it had damaged. The balancing takes limbs, skin, and what seems most important of all is a small stuffed animal. We can assume that the plushie was a relic from the Narahede's time as a human, and as the plushie is balanced, the Narahede screams a scream that Nanache knows all too well. For this scream is depicted in the same way as Middy's from her transformation all too long ago. Strangely enough, Riko's not the only one compensated during this balancing. Several Narahede are also depicted as receiving compensation. I don't have an answer as to why they would receive anything since Riko was the only one affected, but we'll go with the idea that they were compensated for their time. If you have any ideas, leave them in the comments. I'd like to see what you all think. As the balancing continues, we learn from Maje that items taken outside the village, which we find out is named
Il Blue,
like Prishka, are unaffected by the balancing, meaning that
Il Blue,
can only value things once they've entered, and thus has no power outside of its walls. Riko is then given her share of the balancing, as compensation for her damaged value. This takes shape in the form of the
Il Blue,
currency, which brings up the disturbing image that all
Il Blue,
money is made of the bodies and possessions of its residents. Let that sink in. Maji then explains that the value given to Riko is bound to her. What this means is a little vague, but try to think of it like this. Think of it like a memory. No matter what you do, your memories will always be yours. Even if you forget them, you'll always be connected to them. This may not be the best explanation, but it's the best way I can think of explaining it. So, Maji leaves our gang, stating that now that people have seen the children's value, no harm should come to them. The group then decides to find a place to rest, but quickly find out that unlike Maje, the other Narahede of this village don't speak English. Riko, however, by using her god-tier charades abilities and some phrases she picked up from Maje, communicates to the Narahede that they were looking for an inn. Nanache makes a good point as well. Despite just watching a Narahede literally being pulled apart, Riko just keeps on trucking. And after a short while, the group is brought to an inn by the Narahede. But before anything else, I must bring your attention to the innkeeper Narahede. I love this Narahede, I want a plushie right now. Please, I need this in my life. Moving on though, the group successfully rents a room and food. Despite the room being a tad off-putting with its pulsating toilet and whatever the heck is in that bowl, the place is good enough. And of course, despite its appearance, Riko and Nanache dig into the bowl's mysterious contents anyway. which immediately gives Riko a stomachache. After Riko rushes off the meat with the toilet, Reagan and Nache leave in search of remedies for both Riko and Manya. However, upon leaving, Reagan and Nache are passed by a swarm of Naruhede, followed shortly after by a sudden crash. Rig spots Mage within the crowd of Naruhede and asks what's going on. Mage states that it is Faputa, an immortal being of value that may go where she pleases. Upon hearing this, Reagan and Nache split up, believing that this Faputa may have had something to do with Prushka's kidnapping. Reg goes to scout it out while Nache stays behind to take care of Riko and Manya. Mage, despite wishing to meet with Faputa, decides to assist Nache in helping Riko out of fear that she may lose her value. After pushing through the crowd of Naruhede, Reg exits the village, and upon leaving comes face to face with the figure we saw in the previous chapter, who turns out to be Faputa, the princess of the Naruhede, and alongside her is a large mechanical being. And this is where the chapter comes to an end. So there's a lot to process in this chapter. First, we're introduced to the balancing, an all-powerful force within the village, which brings forth the question as to what the village is to have such an ability. We're also introduced to Faputa, the princess of the Naruhede, as well as her robotic assistant. From what we've seen, the Naruhede of
Il Blue.
cannot leave, yet Faputa can. So what makes her so special? Maybe she's like Nanache and was made outside of the village? We'll have to wait and find out. So, that's the end of the video. It's been a long time coming, but I'm finally back. I've been busy, to say the least, which put me into a creative rut for a while, thus the lack of content over the past 2 months. I'm back though, and I'll be trying to get things back on track with more consistent content. Or not, and my uploads will be as infrequent as the Made in Abyss manga's release date. Either way, I want to thank you all for sticking with me, and for the over 1,800 views on my Bone Druid character review video. I'm truly grateful for all of your support, and I hope that all the future content won't disappoint. But that's all for now. This has been the Professor Z, signing out.